Football fans, far and wide, welcome to the NFL Super Wild Card Weekend Recap. The slate of 6 games were incredibly exciting. A lot of heartbreak, a lot of comebacks, a lot of unexpected results this week. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. But before, I want to remind anyone watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Anyone watching on a podcast platform, subscribe and give us a rating. It would be greatly appreciated as we bring in Omar Yusuf into this and Naif at the same time. Wow, simultaneous entry here. We got Omar Yusuf and NFG. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah. On the
Guys, I'm at work. I'm just here to say, go Cowboys. Do the damn thing. We're going to derail the Brock Purdy train. And I just want to check in on my guys. That's it.
nice,
That's all I got to
nice.
say to them.
You got to you got to bounce, huh? You got to get back to the grind.
I'm actually at work. I'm taking this call at work. See
Nice.
the dedication?
No, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can just take a half-hour break and talk about football. Why not do that?
In an hour, I can do that.
Okay.
Can't do that now, man. I got some work to get to. But
Gotcha,
go Cowboys. Congrats. We're going to kick some 49er ass next week. We got you.
All right, nice.
Take
I
care.
like it. All right, man. Thanks for jumping on. Nice. Well, welcome, Omar Yusuf. I was just starting the podcast and just getting into talking about the San Francisco 49ers beating my Seattle Seahawks 41-23. Of course, this was a bit of a seesaw game, a little bit unexpected. I kind of thought the Niners were going to blow out the Seahawks in this one. But, Niners stormed out of the gate here 10-0. And then the Hawks came back to take the lead at halftime, 17-16, with some great connections between Geno and DK. DK had 10 catches, 136 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Hawks attacked the one glaring weakness on the Niners defense, which is their cornerback, Lenore. And it worked in patches, but, the seesaw threw the Hawks right off the ride in the second half when the Niners scored 25 straight points and Lenore, of all people, intercepted Geno, and then Geno again lost a fumble that Bosa recovered. Geno started that first half great. The first half of the season, he started the first half of the season great, but in the second half, he's really kind of regressed closer to the quarterback we expected him to be, which involves too many turnovers for my liking. The Niners only punted once all game. They put up over 500 yards of offense. When the Hawks stopped them, it was usually for field goals. Field goals for the Niners were wins for that Hawks defense, which is not enough. And an odd statistic in this game, the Hawks defense actually had 8 tackles for loss, 3 of them by Nwosu. And other than that, Niners are just a machine on offense. McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel McCaffrey and Samuel have the ability to accelerate the way that not many people do. They just run past everyone in the defense. They make defensive backs look like defensive linemen with the way they accelerate. And then you throw in Kittle and Ayuk and Purdy not making mistakes. It just seems like every time I see his stat line, it's like 2 or 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And that's not to say that he doesn't throw the ball to the other team sometimes. It just doesn't seem to result in interceptions. So I want to get your idea about this game. Did you see any of it? What did you think of this one? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I didn't watch part of it. I told you I stopped watching because I was like, inshallah, maybe it would help you out. But
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we kind of overanalyze these things, and I think this game, like you kind of said, if you look at it objectively, and I appreciate like you as a fan kind of giving that objective outlook, you thought that it wouldn't be close.
Yeah.
And I think like this was just a game where you had a Hawks team that, to be quite honest, like overachieved. And I don't mean that in, any kind of negative light. If anything, I kind of mean that as a compliment to the team
for sure,
what they were able to accomplish, And I think they just kind of ran into a buzzsaw. Like you and I have been we've been praising San Francisco as one of like the top 2 or 3 teams in the league. Like all, even when they were like 3 and 4 or whatever they were, I was like, no, this team is like legit. And I think the talent just kind of, it's funny because this game was actually kind of back and forth for a bit. Like
Hmm.
it was looking like, oh, we might have something here. And then I think in the second half, I think the talent just kind of started to shine through, or the discrepancy in the talent levels. And yeah, I agree with you on the way that the Niners play. Like their two biggest weapons, Debo and McCaffrey. Like it's weird, right? Like they're not like burners, right? Like if you're running like straight line, they're not like the fastest guys on the field, but they just have a way to get away from defenders. Like they're very bursty, right? Like in short spaces, they have a very quick burst, and I think that gets them away from a lot of these defenders. And it's funny, they're also like kind of similar almost in how they run. Like Debo, I heard somebody. I was listening to another podcast, and they said Debo, is he number one wide receiver? I don't know, but is he like a number one weapon? Like absolutely,
Hmm.
like absolutely. Like the way that they deploy him, the way that they use him, he's a wide receiver who can play running back, and then you flip it around, and McCaffrey's a running back who can play wide receiver,
Scary.
and you take that and you pair it with their defense. It's kind of funny. They kept like crediting Nick Bosa in this game, where that fumble recovery was not even like he didn't do anything. You know what I mean?
He's the
Like he
big
didn't
name,
even do
yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, still like they are to me still right now the class of the NFC. I still have them as the best team right now. Um, on the flip side, and I think you would know better than this. I think what a season for the Hawks, man. Like they're supposed to be like a lottery team, right? Like a
Hmm.
top 5 team. This is what everybody was anticipating. Didn't know what to expect from Gino, and like I know you're saying that he regressed a little bit, but still, like what you got out of him was a pleasant surprise.
For sure.
And you take that and you pair it with some of the, you know, this is a really good draft class. It seems like I don't know like the entire depth of the class, but when you have Woolen and you have Walker and the impact that they made, or the impacts that they made each on each side of the ball, I think it's something to build on. This was like a win-win. You guys make the playoffs, you guys compete, overachieve, you guys find like these young kind of building blocks or these young pieces, and you got like a top 10 pick. So I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason for you guys. I mean, and I think the big question is, what do you do at quarterback, right? And
Hmm.
if you had asked me like a month ago, I would have said, oh yeah, you resign Gino, no question. Now I'm like, you could, and I still think they probably will. But I wonder now, like, maybe he wants more money than what they want to give him, or maybe because this is like his last shot, right, to get like a big payday, probably.
Right.
So, yeah, the Seahawks are going to be an interesting team, I think, to watch this offseason to kind of see. But I think that they have things to build on. I just think that this game kind of went, how we probably would have expected it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely the final score. And to touch on some points you made, Gino after the game said that he acknowledged that the Seahawks gave him that chance, and that if not for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, he's probably out of the league right now. And instead, he's given this opportunity to showcase who he is. And of course, the season on balance, a great year for him. He is going to be going to the Pro Bowl after all, which was unthinkable, especially to me, even as a Seahawks fan. It was unthinkable that at the beginning of the year he'd be going to the Pro Bowl. Yeah, these last few games, I have, you know, seen a drop in what he's done relative to the beginning of the season. But in that post game press conference, he said, "I want to reward the Seahawks for giving me this chance." So what that says to me is that hopefully he rewards them in the sense of a what they call a hometown discount, where he brings down the price, because otherwise you're talking about maybe franchising him, and franchising him means giving him somewhere between 30 and 40 million for a year, which is a lot, or signing him
Right.
to a multi-year deal with a lot of money, which would would not be great for them. I mean, that's kind of when they started to go downhill with with Russell is when they gave him a bunch of money. So hopefully he does take that discount. You're right that the rookie class, Tariq Woolen, the two offensive linemen, Kobe Bryant, a lot of
I
these,
forgot.
yeah,
I forgot about Cross and like Kobe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, I think that the rookie class is great, and in this draft they have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, including the fifth overall pick. So if they get this right, then next year they could absolutely be very good. And I got to give kudos to Pete Carroll. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year. This turned out to just be like better than last year even. So kudos to. I agree in the big picture. Yeah, I think that they're in a good place. Um, yeah. Meanwhile, the Niners, like you mentioned, they look really scary. They're off to the divisional championship, and guys like Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. You mentioned something about them that they're not burners, but I see them break more tackles than they should every game. Debo breaks all these tackles. Like his body's not built to break these tackles, but he still does it. And Christian McCaffrey has this form of running that he looks like he's like a track star. And I think his mom was like a track star, and he just runs with form. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do in the next round here. We will eventually get to that. But we'll move now to the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Los Angeles Chargers 31-30. I watched this game in disbelief. This was another seesaw game, but with a much more forceful movement of the seesaw from one side to the other. What did you think of this one?
Okay. I swear to God, like wallahi, I swear to God, bro. Like in the back of my head during like that first half, I was like, what if? Cause I just felt like this lead, like it's just weird. I was like, what if? I didn't make any proclamations. I didn't make any predictions. In the back of my head, I was just like, what if? Like, there's just a very small part of me that was like, I don't know if this game's over.
Is it because the Chargers have done this before?
No, it was just like this feeling that I was getting about like the way that everything. It was like it was so lopsided that it
Yeah.
was like, bro, what is going on? I don't think that the Chargers are that much better than the Jaguars. Like, now you can make the case that they're a better team, but I don't think they're like that much better. And so I was just like, I don't know, man, something's up here. But I mean, I wasn't confident enough to like say that or predict that. But yeah, man, this was an all-time collapse. Like this, I mean, I've seen some collapses. This one is like definitely top three, top five. Like this is crazy. Like I
Yeah.
think it was like the third biggest uh, margin that any team has ever come by, at least in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And like I'm trying to think back to that game, and I don't. It's I'm looking at the box score right now, and so Justin Herbert, 273 yards, 1 touchdown, and like you think about it, and it's just like, bro, if it wasn't for the Jaguars, if it wasn't for Trevor Lawrence, here's the thing: Trevor Lawrence threw some horrible picks.
Oh yeah.
Like it wasn't just like deflections or no. Some of those were horrible balls. But you know what, man? Like props to him for like hanging in there and kind of like gutting through it because it canceled out in the end. And the other thing is I think both of these teams. It's kind of funny. You remember like a few weeks ago we did a podcast where Anayef said, "Oh, he thinks that the Chargers are like a dark horse team."
I do remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and I was like, bro, the way the Jaguars are playing, with how hot they were, how well Trevor Lawrence was playing, I was like, maybe we should pay more attention to the Jaguars right now.
Hmm.
And this game to me made no sense. Like this was like one of those classic like just playoff like games that you talk about for the next 10, 15, 20 years just because of like you throw out all of like the analysis and everything. We can get into that, but like just like being up like 27 to nothing or whatever it was, and then only scoring 3 points in the second half, bro. Like, how do you? The thing is like the Chargers now. I think it's very safe to say have a history of or a culture. It's not even like a culture of losing. It's like a culture of like collapsing, right? Just like
Exactly.
it's crazy. And I'm reading reports now that they want to keep Staley.
Oof.
I don't know what to make of that. I think he makes like really bizarre decisions. I think he's I'm all for being aggressive. I'm all for it, but like there's a time when it crosses into being reckless that you got to be careful. Like playing Mike Williams in Week 18
Yep.
in a that game was completely meaningless to them. I get it if you want to play them for a little bit and then you pull them, cool. But getting him hurt, that was on him. And I just, I could point the finger at the Chargers players, but I just can't get over the fact that you blew a 27-point lead, bro. Like, I can't. Like, the coach is to blame here, and all the credit in the world to, like, the Jaguars for, like, chipping away and eventually, like, coming through and winning this game somehow. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Resilient. Just so resilient. And, Trevor Lawrence, 4 interceptions. I think all of them were in the first half. At least 3 of them were in the first half. 3 of them were to superstar Asante Samuel Jr., who had also 6 total passes defensed. Just incredible. And then Lawrence just picked it up in the second half, threw 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. And like you mentioned, this game was 27-0 Chargers. I was sitting here with my family watching this game, and I kept mentioning as well how this would shock me less if it happened just because of what happened with the Vikings and the Colts earlier this year, when it was 33-0. But this is the playoffs. I thought, well, the Vikings, they have a little bit of pedigree, and maybe they'd be able to come back. But this is the playoffs. This is the Jaguars. I don't know that they would be able to do it. But this was the collision course of 2 teams with losing cultures. You know what I mean? I mean, if it was going to happen to anyone, it seemed like it would happen to the Chargers. And, like you mentioned, Staley, man, this guy continues to make really weird coaching decisions in his tenure. And, the biggest thing is he did not dedicate the offense to running the ball up 27-0. He continued to have Herbert pass the ball, which is really unforgivable when you have this kind of a result. Like you mentioned as well, Mike Williams not playing this game because Staley decided to play all of his starters in Week 18 when there was nothing on the line. This was one of those. This was one of those scheduling things that the NFL gifted you. The way the NFL gifted the Packers that game in the late night. They gifted the Chargers this game because they played at 4 p.m. The Ravens played at 1. They lost the game. So you're already settled into the 5 seed. So whatever your game plan is, you got to pull those starters. And Mike Williams would have been really helpful for them in this game. I mean, Keenan Allen is great, but after that, Mike Williams would have been really helpful for them. So on the Jaguars side, Travis Etienne running on the outside where he belongs, not kind of within the tackles. He looked really impressive, ran for over 100 yards. Evan Ingram continues to be a wide receiver in tight end fur. I mean, essentially, he looks like a wide receiver to me. His number is a wide receiver number. On defense, Josh Allen, 4 QB hits. And this guy named Roy Robertson Harris dominated the game. He had 7 tackles, 1 sack, 4 tackles for loss, 2 passes defense, 2 QB hits. This Jaguars defense seems to have a really good defensive line that I was unaware of other than Josh Allen.
They're going to be Tyson Campbell is also very good. Like
Tyson Campbell, yeah, absolutely.
They're going to be really scary, man. Like next year, I think. Well, who knows? Who knows what they do this year? Especially when they get, they're going to get Calvin Ridley next year.
Oh, that's right.
The receiving core is going to be even better.
Unless he gambles again.
Yeah, well, you never know.
They're going to be very scary if they have Cal. I mean, you got to think like who's going to take. Whose spot is he going to take? You think?
Yeah, the thing is like I don't think Calvin Ridley is like one of these like alpha wide receivers, but what they would have is like you'd have a bunch of like guys, like they would have like these like route runners and like really good receivers, and like they would be very deep. That's I guess what I'm trying to say. They would be very deep. They wouldn't be like top heavy at receiver, but they'd be very deep. Like you'd have, I'm looking at not Ingram, Kirk, Jones, both Jones, and then you throw in Calvin Ridley, and then you have Travis Etienne like coming out of the backfield who can also catch. Like, bro, that's a very deep team.
I agree. All very solid. It seems like they're all kind of on the same level. All good wide receivers, and Ridley could be above average like he showed in the Falcons. So. For the Chargers, yeah, it's going to be interesting where they go from here. They said they're going to keep Staley. I don't really know how you keep him for more than maybe 1 more year if he doesn't succeed.
It has to be. I think they just fired their OC today.
Oh, they did? Okay.
I think. I'd have to check, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, to close this off, congrats to the Jaguars. This is already a successful season for them. I mean,
Yeah,
for them to come from where they are, they thought they were Titans were clearly ahead of them in the division. There was no chance for them to come back, but Titans faltered. Jaguars, I think, have won. I think Jaguars are on a winning streak at this point. They've won maybe like 6 of 7 or 7 of 8 or something like that. So
yeah, it's
kudos
crazy.
to them. They're a pretty crazy team. I mean, they're fun to watch. So we'll move on now to the Sunday games. The Buffalo Bills beating the Miami Dolphins 34-31. The Dolphins were once a high-powered offense in the beginning of the season. They only rushed for 42 yards, and even with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who make any QB look great, they got less than 70 yards each in this game. What did you see here?
So first of all, I still haven't seen. I maybe it's just because I didn't look into it afterward. Why did Teddy Bridgewater not play this game? Like I don't. And I mean, maybe you know, but um, yeah, like it was just a tough spot for playing a rookie quarterback in the playoffs on the road
Yeah,
against maybe the best team, the first or second best team in the AFC, right?
right.
You're kind of setting him up to not do well. But I will say this: they kind of made it. They made it a game in that second quarter. Like I thought, there was a point in time where I was like, "Oh, we might have something here." But yeah, like you're saying, I don't really think that the passing game, it struggled a little bit here. I know Waddle got hurt a little bit, um, but even when he was in the game, it was hard to see them moving the ball through the air. They weren't really pushing it down the field like they've been doing all year. Like there was a point in time where it looked like Tyreek Hill was going to get 2,000 yards and
Hmm.
Jalen Waddle might get like 1,500, which is crazy. But yeah, they struggled here, and I'm sure that like the Bills' defense had something to do with that as well. I just think that this had a lot more to do with a rookie quarterback playing in his first playoff game, and I don't even know how many games he's played this year. I think it was just like one or two. So
Yeah.
that to me was like a curious decision. I mean, unless Bridgewater's hurt, I don't know.
He seems to be always hurt.
Yeah, yeah. Um, on the flip side, I think Buffalo just continues to kind of show that they're one of the powerhouse teams in the league. They ran the ball well. Receiving game was working. Uh, Josh Allen was interesting in this game. I think he threw a couple picks, um,
As usual.
but yeah, as usual. But they have weapons, so it makes up for it. And that defense, when you're playing at home, it's sometimes you can get away with some of these like interceptions and whatnot, like when you're still playing that aggressive. So yeah, I think ultimately the discrepancy in quarterback, play was kind of like the dispositive factor here. With no disrespect to Skylar Thompson, I put that more on McDaniels, who actually didn't call a bad game. I thought he was all right. I just don't know why you just don't go with Teddy Bridgewater, because I could see them competing. They only lost by 3 points,
Yeah.
so I mean you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I just assumed he was injured because he wasn't playing at the end of the season, and that's always my assumption. My assumption on default about Teddy Bridgewater is that he is injured, just based on what I know about his career. But it was kind of bizarrely the Dolphins' defense and special teams that kept them alive in this game.
Yep.
Dolphins' defense had 7 sacks and 13 QB hits on Josh Allen. They were really in his face all game. Xavier Howard and Javon Holland both had interceptions, and then that Zach Sealer fumble return for a touchdown. In addition, Sealer also had 6 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 tackle for loss, and 4 QB hits. He was a menace, and in the backfield for the Dolphins. Um, and all that to say that this game, ultimately, even though he threw 2 interceptions, this was about the connection between Josh Allen and his 2 top receivers, Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Both of them got 114 yards each, and that's really all it took. Bills defense showed up like they usually do. They had also 10 passes defensed and 11 QB hits. Miserable day for Skyler for most of this game. Um, and then elite kicking in this game. All 11 kicks were made, and you can't take that for granted nowadays. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But this game was, it was kind of bizarre because I was looking on Twitter like after this game, and it seemed like a lot of Dolphins fans, even though they were the losing team, they seemed pleasantly surprised and upbeat. And the Bills fans, the winning team, were all kind of worried about what happened and kind of looking to the future. Oh, we're not going to beat the Chiefs. We're not going to beat the Bengals. So that was kind of interesting. Um, Overall, the takeaway for me for the Dolphins is I think they do have a bright future, but they really need to stabilize that quarterback position. It doesn't look like any of these three quarterbacks on this roster are going to be the answer for them. And on the Bills side, they have a crazy rematch against the Bengals. Now, only 3 weeks after that emotional game with the
Yeah.
Damar Hamlin incident, so we're going to see what happens in that game. That's going to be really kind of interesting to see where the emotions are, which team has the edge there. But we'll move on now to maybe one of the most surprising results of the weekend. New York Giants beating the Minnesota Vikings 31-24. Um, Lots of stuff happened in this game, obviously, but the most simple explanation is this game was not at 1 p.m. Therefore, Kirk Cousins could not use his Superman cape. What do you think of this NFC East team? Now, three of them are going to be in the NFC divisional championship.
So I guess I gotta say the Giants are not the worst 9-6-1 team of all time. Like they have earned the right, to not be called that. What a game by them, man. I kind of had a feeling that they actually had a chance to win this game. Again, I was too much of a coward to, I think, actually like proclaim it.
Mm.
But I kind of have this feeling like, hey man, the Giants. I think they're I think they're hungry, and I think Dable kind of like is very good at harnessing that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that he's done very well is that he's put his two most important players on offense. Maybe not. I don't even know if they're the best. I mean, Saquon is. I don't know if Daniel Jones is the second best player on offense, but he is probably the most important, as the quarterback. And he puts them in positions to succeed. I saw a stat the other day where he had like Daniel Jones has had like 9 fumbles in like the previous like 3 seasons or something,
Mm.
and he has like 0 this. It's like something crazy. I don't
Really,
remember off the top of. Huh?
really, I didn't realize that.
It's like something crazy, but the point is that he's like essentially like minimized his turn, because that was the big thing with him, right? It was like how much he turned the ball over. He doesn't have that problem this year, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the offense is clicking, the play calls. Like, bro, I'm looking at the box score right now. Daniel Jones had 17 carries, 17 carries for 78 yards.
Wow.
That like when you know that your quarterback, that's a strength of his, and you can scheme that into your game plan, then I mean that's just really good offensive scheming, good coaching. And the thing is, it didn't feel like he had 17 carries. Like like you were just surprised when I told you, and he still threw the ball 35 times. So 78 yards on the ground, 300 yards through the air. Like I think he is, the coaching like is tailored to the strength of that team, and they're maximizing that talent to the best that they can. And in a lot of ways, kind of over maximizing, like overachieving here.
Mm-hmm.
So, kudos to them. This is like, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the players, but so much of this is on the coaching and like what they've been able to do. I also would say that Kayvon Thibodeau looks really good. He was flying around,
Yeah.
and I think he's kind of like come on the second half of the season. The other side, I agree with you, man. Like this, it's funny because like if you look at Kirk Cousins' numbers, he didn't play bad. Like 31-39, 2 touchdowns. He had a decent quarterback rating or a good quarterback rating. But I mean, we saw this we kind of saw this at times from the Vikings, and it kind of like suggested that this might be the case, right? They had like the lowest point differential of any number 2 seed, I think. And, no, they're not. They're not the number 2 seed, but they had like one of the worst point differentials. I think of a 12-win team. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was like the worst point differential of a 12-win team, in the past, like, I don't know, like 25 years or something. Or maybe it was ever. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But, that is like kind of a damning stat because that shows that, you know, we're not really seeing that level of thoroughness in their play, as was the fact that they were like 7-0 in one score games, and now they're 0-1 in one score games in the playoffs,
Oof.
right? And it kind of like came back to bite them there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like my big takeaway is like this kind of exposed like the story of the season for each teams.
Where can you go other than Brian Dable? Because we've seen these players. We've seen Daniel Jones has been in the league. Saquon Barkley has been in the league. These tight ends, Bellinger out of nowhere, Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodge. I mean, these guys were buried in depth charts and already in the league. He's turned Daniel Jones' career around, where a lot of people were saying that he was done, that he was gonna be out of this league essentially.
Yep.
And then turning, like I mentioned, Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton into, at least for this game, star receivers. They combined for 200 yards. Um, like you mentioned, Daniel Jones again outrushed Saquon. This has happened at least like two or three times in the past few weeks. Um, they give him the name Vanilla Vic now. I mean, I'm not sure how that applies. He's not quite as fast as Vic, but it's a cool nickname. But yeah, man, going back to Kirk Cousins, like you mentioned, good game. You mentioned his stats: two touchdowns, no picks. Actually didn't make a mistake at all, which he usually does. But it was more about a stout Giants defense that would stop a lot of these players when they caught the ball. Justin Jefferson had 7 catches, but only 47 yards. 7 catches, 47 yards. So very sure tackling by that Giants defense. You mentioned they have a really great defensive line. Thibodeau, Aziz Angelari, and some other guys. But the best player for the Vikings was T.J. Hawkinson. He had 10 catches, 129 yards. They really kind of exploited, I guess, the coverage of the linebackers for the Giants. He's paid dividends, for a guy they picked up at the trade deadline. But overall, it just wasn't enough. Zardarius Smith, he was playing really, really well to start the season. He was looking like a defensive MVP candidate, and he disappeared in this game. He basically did nothing. Um, but yeah, I mean, overall, the Vikings underperformed relative to their expectations. And Roddy, I don't know where you're at, bro. I know you think this game was rigged or whatever happened, and they're supposed to go 17-0 and all this stuff. But hitching your wagon to the Vikings has proved to be, kind of a sad endeavor. And the Giants, they continue their miraculous season, going now to face their division rival Philadelphia, where I just saw this stat that they haven't won in Philadelphia in 10 years. Uh, but, and I'll save this for a pick'em show. I think they have a really legitimate chance to win this game, and we'll discuss that I think later in this week. Based on kind of what I've seen, I am judging this a little bit about what I saw in the final game of the season, where Philadelphia was playing most of their players and Giants were playing nobody, and it was a 16-22 game. And you just never know. I think it's going to be a really good matchup. I'm giving the Giants a better chance than I think a lot of people are, to be honest with you.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on now to the Sunday night game. Cincinnati Bengals beat the Baltimore Ravens 24-17. This to me was a strange AFC North game. Teams very familiar with each other. The Ravens played better than their talent level, and the Bengals played below their talent level. And this tends to be the case in divisional games. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a great way of putting it. I didn't expect that. I thought this game would be a more decisive win for Cincinnati than it was. I think Huntley played well, man. Contextually,
Right.
if I'm looking at this on a curve, I think he played very well for a number 2 quarterback. He made some mistakes, a goal line fumble he had, but hey, man, who cares? At that point, you're playing with house money. If I'm him, so just go for it. I thought he played pretty well. I thought the Ravens' run game was all right. It wasn't anything great, but I thought it was all right. And I thought their defense played well. They kind of shut down the Bengals run game. Joe Mixon didn't do anything. Um, it was a more boring game than I was kind of anticipating. To be quite
Absolutely.
honest with you, it was
Yeah.
pretty boring.
Yeah.
I think the highlight was obviously that fumble return, and that kind of like that was like the deciding play in this whole game, both in terms of like the score, but also like the momentum. I don't think the Ravens ever really recovered from that, and I mean, we'll see. Like if the Bengals can kind of reset, I think they can, and kind of like go in and play the Bills. But like you said, sometimes this just happens. Like these divisional games, especially in the first round of the playoffs, like sometimes you don't really know what to expect. Like weird things happen. But this was just one of those like, man, like this was probably like the worst game of the weekend in terms
Definitely.
of like watchable, like quality. I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like looking at the offense, no one offensive player really stood out here. Jamar Chase had 9 catches, but only 84 yards on those catches. This entire game was, like you mentioned, defined by that single play. Huntley trying to sneak in a touchdown at the goal line, but getting the ball knocked out, and a defensive lineman of all people, Sam Hubbard, running 98 yards for the game-winning touchdown. That was really the one exciting moment in this game. J.K. Dobbins now famously post-game criticized both his coaches and Huntley, saying that the goal line run should have been his, and that Lamar would have won that game. I mean, I don't know how you say stuff like that and expect to, I don't know, stay around, or maybe you think Lamar is gone, or I'm not sure, but he wanted more than those 13 carries, and some might say it was warranted given he averaged about 5 yards a carry. Maybe that would have been better for them. I think despite Huntley playing above his skill level in this game, I think the Ravens need to do some soul searching regarding how they fundamentally scout their quarterbacks, and I think they need to actually bring in some proper ones on this team. And I think they have a good defense. I think they have good running backs. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and a lot of these guys. They have the best kicker in the league, in my opinion, and Rashad Bateman, whose career is his career potential is being wasted without a quarterback. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. Huntley played okay in this game, but all these other guys, Anthony Brown is not the answer. I don't think Lamar is the answer. So that's the
Well,
big
that's
takeaway.
yeah, and the other thing I kind of took away was how is Lamar not there? Like I was like that was a bigger deal than I feel like
Mm,
people were not talking about. Um, I know he's hurt. That's fine. And again, I'm pro player when it comes to contracts. Like get your money, 100%. But yeah, I don't. I really don't want to be that guy who like tries to create drama when there is no drama. But I wonder like, does it rub the players the wrong way? Do they feel a certain? It's like, bro, how come like you're not here? Because like I look around and I see players for other teams who are hurt, but they're still there.
hmm
And it was just odd to me that Lamar is not there. So I thought that it seems like it's a very calculated move based on his current contract status, and I think that's going to be one of, if not the biggest, kind of like off-season storyline as far as like free agency and roster moves. Other than like what happens with Brady and Rodgers or whatever, like what happens with Lamar? Are they going to trade him, tag him? Like what's going on? Because like it doesn't look like that relationship is in a good place right now, or in like a great place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll see which team is going to bite. Are the Ravens going to sign him to a long-term extension, or is there another team, Miami? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think it will be. If anyone gives him a long-term contract, you know my feelings on Lamar. I think that would be wasted money. But we shall see. It will be a storyline. But we'll move on to the game of the week. The Dallas Cowboys beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 35 to no, sorry, 31 to 14. Should have been 35 to 14. I'm gonna give you the floor here, man. Congrats on this win. Big
Have
win,
fun.
beating
Thank
Brady
you.
finally.
Have fun. Appreciate it. So here's the thing. Like I kind of like gotta lay the whole atmosphere for this. So Are you familiar with the idea of like the collective conscience, where like everybody is connected through this is like a consciousness that connects like everybody. So like you feel right,
I'm familiar.
bro. I kid you not. The whole day, I'm checking Twitter, I'm checking my phone, messages from Naif. Every Cowboy fans are nervous as heck. Like, bro, it is like their hearts are like thumping out of their chest, like they're every. It's just crazy because you got to think about it. It's the weight that is put on this franchise and these players. 30 years, no road playoff games, right? Every year, whether it's whether it's fair or not, the media talks about the Cowboys as Super Bowl contenders. And yes, I'm purposely putting this on the media because us fans do not say this every single year. Are there some idiot fans who do this? Yes. But for the most part, we understand that there are some years where they might contend and some years where they don't. Anyways, and I also blame Jerry for this. But anyways, there's so much pressure, and I thought, leading up to it, like I had to shut off Twitter, I had to shut off social media, like just block everything out because it was so bad. But man, what a performance when your two most important players step up and have transcendent performances. Dak had an all-time great performance, like
Mm-hmm.
all-time great. There were like, there are so many stats I can get into, and like, how this was like such a rare game that he played. But the big thing is that he bounced back from, a not so good game, and that's me being nice. And he stepped up in the biggest moment against that quarterback. I
Mm-hmm.
know that he's not what he was. I know that that team is not that great. But the stage and the moment where he played, the way that he took over, the way that he dominated and just shredded that defense, that was an all-time great like playoff performance from Dak. The other thing is that Micah Parsons wrecked the game. Like if you look at his box score, you're not going to see like 6 sacks or whatever. But I think he had like 9 pressures, like a few tackles for loss. He had a sack like at the end of the game. Like he was just everywhere.
He
He
had
almost had a
tw-
couple like,
he
huh?
had he had 20 non-called holds according to Naif, who dropped the
Yeah,
20 pictures of the 20 non-called holds. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. And yeah, man, he almost had 2 picks. Like I mean, I think he wasn't really gonna pick them, but pass deflections. And I think like Dak and Mike are the two most important players on this team. They're two of the three best players on the team. If you throw in Zach Martin as well, when they play like this or close to this, or I don't expect like this every week, but like when you play like great, this team like we can contend with I think any other team.
Agreed.
And when that defense, like the first 2 drives, if you notice, the offense was very slow to get going, but the defense hung in there. The defense was ready to go from the get go, and I think they really set the tempo for this game. And the other thing is that the biggest play from this game was made by neither one of them. The biggest play of this game was made by Jaron Curse when he
Mm.
intercepted Tom Brady when it was 6-0, and they were on like the 3 yard line. I don't know, like it was goal to go, and he threw that pick, completely changed the game. Because at that time I'm like, oh, this is going to be a back and forth game. When he threw that pick, it completely changed the whole feel of the game. We were able to go down, score, and from then, after that, we were like kind of off to the races. And yeah, man, like I know that this Tampa team is not that great, but this was more about getting so much of this pressure off of like this collective organization and this franchise, like the fans, the players, like whomever, whether it's fair or not, kind of like just getting past that. And now, like, I've heard so many people say this. I was listening to the post game, like Troy Aikman, Steve Young, like they were saying, like now, like hopefully, like the team can play more free, like more loose, because they're over like this initial like this pressure, this initial like kind of a weight that was placed around them, and now they can go out and just play football, and that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for moving forward. This was a great like kind of first step. It was awesome. Beating Brady is always great. Now it's like, okay, now let's go and play football. Put all like that extraneous stuff that doesn't really matter. McCarthy did a great thing when he showed. I don't know if you saw this, but they had a team meeting, and he showed pictures, like baby pictures, of all the players who were actually alive the last time we won a road playoff game, and there are only 10 players,
Wow.
and they're all babies. This was like 1993, bro.
Wow.
And his point was, all this stuff that's happened is not on you. Like, it's not your fault. You're not connected to it in any way, and it doesn't impact you or how we play. And I thought that was like brilliant coaching.
Pretty genius.
Yeah, because I would hope that it eased like a lot of the nerves that were on them. Because you can say what you want, but I promise you, like, you hear the noise, like, as a player, like, even if you try not to, and for them to kind of like push through it was very impressive. And like, this again, it was a relief to kind of like get past that. It's like, okay, now we can like go play football.
Yeah, for sure. Like you mentioned, this was a Dak Prescott game. This was really his emergence to me in the playoffs. 305 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 running. So he accounted for all 5 of the touchdowns. And despite Maher absurdly missing 4 extra points, and I saw Dak slam his helmet, and some other guys get really upset with him. But yeah, like you said, after that play, Cowboys kind of cruised here in this game, mostly as they tend to do when Dak doesn't throw interceptions. This team cruises, and it really sets the tone for both the offense and the defense. Cowboys defense, like you mentioned, they looked really good. Parsons wreaking havoc as usual, and like you mentioned, Jaron Curse, great game. 3 passes defense, and that interception, that key interception that changed the momentum of the game. On the other side, the Bucks running backs were pathetic again, totaling 51 total yards. This team needs to draft a competent rookie fast running back in the draft next year. Lenny and even Rashad White are not going to do it for this team. Brady wasn't bad. He had 351 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and he spread the ball around equitably, but it wasn't enough. And now some attention will be turned to Brady. What does he do next? Does he retire? Does he go to a different team? My hunch, it seems to be he's now, after a dissolved marriage, addicted to football, and he's going to lean all the way into that. And I think he's going to be playing for another team next year. I think he's likely going to be going to probably the Raiders, where he's from, that part of. Well, actually, no, they're not in Oakland anymore. I think he might go to the Raiders because of McDaniels, but we'll see about that. But Dallas now moves on to a rematch versus the Niners in a matchup that I'm really looking forward to. It's a game where I hope they knock off the Niners. We will talk about this more in the Pick'em pod, but I want to get your just final thoughts about what they might do versus the Niners, what they need to do versus the Niners. Just a quick, as the week progresses, I'm sure more things will come out, but I want to get just like your quick reaction to what do you think they're going to have to do.
Yeah, so looking at it kind of early, I think, when I was thinking about it last night, I actually thought that initially, like, oh, we'll have to like run the ball more. But now that I think about it, I think the weakness of that 49ers defense might actually be the secondary, because the defensive line is incredibly stout, right? The front seven, linebacker core, everything. You might have to throw the ball here, and I don't mean like reckless. I just mean control the game through the air. And going back to Dak, so I've been a Dak guy since the beginning. And I think, what gets lost a lot is he has always been good to great in the playoffs, like, except for last year. He did not play well last year. But so it's just noticed that where he had a season high grade of a passing score of 94. He has he has the second most games with a 90 plus passing score since 2021, including the playoffs. So Pat Mahomes has 7, Dak has 6, Josh Allen has 5. And like my point here is that like you're saying, this was kind of like his emergence, and I think like what you were getting at it was like his emergence into like that elite category of like quarterbacks, and like I certainly think he is more than capable of being that guy, um, and I think this 49ers game, I do think that the team takes it very personally what happened last year because I mean let's be real, we got embarrassed, bullied, punked like
Hmm.
at home when we were favored to win that game, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they respond. I think that the passing game will be important to just control the game, like have a controlled passing game. You don't have to go like you know deep shots all the time. Just control the game through the air. Because I would be surprised if they were able to run on San Francisco, but who knows? Defensively, I think I would kind of lean towards having Micah play less defensive end and have him play more linebacker, but kind of roam around. I don't want him just chasing the running back, but I want him kind of like roaming around. You don't know what he's doing. Oh, is he rushing up the middle? Is he rushing off the edge? We gotta disrupt Purdy. He is like the guy here where you have to scare this kid. Like at this point, I think the other players on that offense are established players. They're great players. So you got to get to the quarterback and kind of disrupt everything. But it's going to be tough. Like San Francisco is a very tough team physically and mentally. Like it's kind of in their DNA to beat you up. That stat, like teams who played the 49ers are like 0 and 14 the next week or something crazy
Oof.
like that. So I expect this to be a very physical game. Just kind of looking at it very, very, very early on. So we'll kind of see how it goes.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean that's a very solid kind of overview, and as the week goes on, I think more things will emerge and maybe more storylines, and whether they're going to get a new kicker, like are they going to keep this guy? Are they going to get a new kicker? What is McCarthy going to do this week? He's certainly matured. I mean, I remember there was this whole thing about the mojo, I think last year, and then now to do this to show the baby pictures of the last time. That's a very clever move, I think. So what does he do this week? To inspire them. Yeah, as we get more kind of context throughout the week, this is the next step for the Cowboys, right? I mean, winning a road game, one, avenging the Niners, a historic rival of theirs, is absolutely the next one, especially on the road. So we will see and definitely talk about it on the Pick'em Pod. Looking forward to that one. But that'll bring this recap to a close, this wild card, this super wild card weekend. I want to thank Omar Yusuf here for joining the podcast and like I mentioned before the podcast started, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, leave a comment, share. If you're listening on a podcast platform, subscribe there, give a rating, follow on Twitter and Instagram, and support this podcast on Ko-fi. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Football v Football podcast. We'll see you on the next one, and have a fantastic day, football fans.